This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. Well, how much stuff have you been told over your course of your life, particularly when it comes to nutrition, that's really basically crap? You know, it's not based on science, but it sounds good, and you just kind of assume that because they told you this in health class, it must be true. And maybe one of the more interesting myths I've run across recently is that we always have to eat from the 4 basic food groups. Those, back in health. Ever since I was a little kid, I was always told you need to eat some meat, some dairy, some grains, and some fruits and vegetables. Okay, where did that come from? 1955, the United States government, the U.S. Department of Agriculture created that message. Now, were there scientists involved in it? I'm sure there was somebody that was involved in it, but was this a recipe for optimal health based on science? No, it was created by the government to help sell agricultural commodities, because the mission of the Department of Agriculture is to sell certain products that the government subsidizes. We subsidize farmers and we subsidize big agriculture, and their job is to sell those products, not necessarily maximizing your health. And I find this fascinating that we know a lot more about how to raise a cow or a pig or a chicken to make them optimally healthy and trying to create as much nutritional value as we can from them at the lowest possible cost than we do about feeding the human animal. Because frankly, it's difficult, if not impossible, to figure out what the ultimate human diet is. It really is when you think about it, because with critters, you can keep them in pens and you can do controlled experiments and you can feed one diet to one animal A and animal B. But people graze. They have the capability of eating anything because we're omnivores. And so we can eat almost anything. The only way to stop that from happening is to basically imprison people from birth to tomb, and to give different control groups different diets and see what works best. And that would be unethical. So we're not going to do that. So there's never going to be any real science that's going to show what the ultimate human diet is. That does not mean that, it's not unknowable, or we can't make good guesses based on, we can take a look at, okay, how were people living when we evolved from being these basic hunter-gatherers up until the point of agriculture? How big were we? What was the age that people lived to? What was the expected, what was the size of the brain? What was the size of the skull and stuff like that? And we can take a look at what we looked at before agriculture and then what happened after we introduced grains. These are things that we at least can study, and I think you can make a good case that it looked like we were stronger and healthier and lived better before agriculture, which meant before we started ultra processing grains and food. We can look at the Egyptians and we can see the rates of cardiovascular disease that came with this one civilization that really prioritized wheat and bread as their main staple food. And I think you can see the declining health rates, and you can see health problems coming from certain dietary sects. So, when you look at people that are vegan, you can see vitamin deficiencies and you can see health problems coming from that particular subset of people. You can take a look at carnivores, and I really wish they would do more studies on people that have eaten almost an exclusively carnivore diet for long periods of time, and take a look at health markers that would show have they put certain diseases into remission? Are they getting stronger? Are they improving their overall health and longevity? But even then, in my own case, trying to figure out if what I'm doing is really making me healthy, you got to also realize that for over 50 years, I ate a standard American diet, and it varied a lot. I had weight problems for extended periods of times, and I'm not quite sure, with absolute certainty, what the long-term effects of all that bad diet that I had may have had for my health and what has been corrected with switching over to a low-carb carnivore diet. I suspect I can look at certain markers of health that I think are important. I can look at my overall metabolic health, which is, I've gone from having full-blown metabolic syndrome to getting rid of it. My waist circumference is down significantly. My blood pressure is down. Blood glucose is down. My HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, is high, and my triglycerides are low. Those things are, within optimal ranges for good health. I know that my A1C is in a very healthy range. I know that my insulin level is good. I can look at other biological markers, but does that mean that necessarily I'm absolute optimal health and set up for longevity? And frankly, nobody can know that because the science just doesn't allow you to do it. I mean, you can do epidemiological studies where you look at large groups of people and you say, okay, what did you eat? And how long, and we'll track you and we'll see how long you live. The problem is diets change. If you had asked me that survey back when I was 50, you would have gotten a very different answer than when I was 60. And when I was 50, frankly, I couldn't tell you, what I ate a week ago because I ate out a lot and was, my diet was constantly switching all the time. And there'd be different fads that would come up that would get me interested in eating certain foods. But for really the last 7-8 years, I've been pretty darn consistent. If you ask me now what I ate 2 weeks ago, I could tell you with pretty relative certainty, 90% certainty, that I had 4 eggs in the morning and a half pound of meat, and then I had a pound of meat for dinner. Twice a week I have 4 ounces of sardines, and once a week I have liver. Okay, because that's pretty darn consistent. But that's been that way for a few years. That has not been the long term of my life. So if I'm answering one of those surveys right now, I could give it to you for about 5 years, but other than that, not so much. And what would be the long-term effects? If you're trying to do a longevity study, what was the bad effects of over 50 years of a standard American diet? Probably not good, but we can't tell. So every now and then, take a look back and ask yourself about what have you been sold as far as what's healthy and where's that information coming from. And frankly, the idea of the 4 basic food groups, that is government propaganda designed to sell you agricultural products. It has nothing to do with health. It has nothing to do with your overall wellness. Because remember, in this fight for your health, you're all alone. You're the only one that can figure out what's going to work. And ultimately, you have one life and you have a responsibility to try to figure it out. But we can all be alone in this together. And, there's more resources now than have ever existed. I know it's difficult to separate fact from fiction, to separate the propaganda and the flat-out BS that's out there. But, you have a responsibility to you, your health, the people around you to try to figure this stuff out. Nobody else can do it. You're it. And ultimately, you have the responsibility, and don't give it up to your doctor because frankly, there's no institution that is really looking after your health when you really get down to it. Government does not have a responsibility. The Department of Agriculture does not have a responsibility to make you healthy. They have a responsibility to sell agricultural products. Big Pharma, their duty, frankly, is not to your health, but it is to their shareholders. Hospital chains have a profit motive, and they are responsible to their shareholders too. Everybody is working with a complete callous disregard for your health, and they're trying to sell their stuff for their reasons. So just keep that in mind, that when you're going through this stuff, what are they selling? Who are they responsible to? Take a look at the advice from that perspective. And that's the helpful thing. I mean, that's truly, as an adult, you've got to realize that not everybody is looking after your health at the end of the day. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore, trying to help people get healthier and stronger. If you like this message, please hit like and subscribe. Join this channel of other like-minded folks. I will talk to you again soon.